Good evening. Welcome to the November 15th Board of Selectmen meeting. We'll accept the agenda by unanimous consent, but I will note that the determination on the tax allocation will be being continued until the meeting on the 29th of November. Announcements?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. The sewer projects, specifically the Nantucket Harbor Shimmo and Plus Area Sewer Extension Project, our sewer director is off island, so he asked me to give his update for the week, and he's got a couple other projects on here too. So this Nantucket Harbor Shimmo Plus project is as follows. McLean and Tashima Lane all have mainline work. Manhole inverts and manhole risers and covers have all been installed. There's a crew progressing down Green Meadow Lane. Another crew is continuing on Vesper Lane. They've installed an 8-inch main into Pollywog Pond Road and have had some of the manhole inverts and covers installed on the main line in Vesper Lane. They are now on Hummock Pond Road heading towards Meadowview and Hussey Farm. The C Street Pump Station renovation. The diesel bypass was tested and run on last Friday, and all the channels were cleaned by the sewer department in preparation for the full bypass. I'm going to skip some of this. It's kind of lengthy. Demolition will begin shortly. Project materials are being delivered, and that project is well underway. The Surfside Treatment Plant upgrade is progressing well. That's all I'm going to say about that. The CCTV work, closed caption TV work in the water mains and sewer mains has been going on in Sconset for the past few weeks, and they've run into multiple complications and surprise findings in Sconset, which actually probably isn't all that surprising considering the state of the sewer system in Sconset. Baxter Road, for the most part, was surveyed. However, they had to abandon certain sections due to extremely heavy amounts of sand and grit. It has been discovered that most, if not all, the homes removed, including when they moved the lighthouse, that none of the laterals were properly capped, and large amounts of debris is entering into the collection system. The crews found numerous buried and unmarked manholes along the survey routes. So I guess they've got their work cut out for them in Sconset. So that's the sewer update. And I'm sure David would elaborate if he were here. The Children's Beach boat ramp is closed until January 15th for repairs. The 2018 annual town meeting warrant is currently open for citizen warrant article submittals until November 20th at 4 p.m. That is next Monday at 4 p.m. There's no selectmen's meeting next Wednesday, the 22nd. Offices are closed on Thursday, but they are open on Friday. Please make a note, we have a special town election coming up on November 28th. It is for a ballot question for the fire station supplemental appropriation. And lastly, it's not on the agenda because it came in a bit late. There, on Monday, November 27th at 6 p.m. here in this room, there is a public meeting regarding the town's update to its hazard mitigation plan, which will identify natural hazards that affect the island and discuss activities to be performed to natural hazards so as to minimize damage. So if people are interested in that, Monday, November 27th, 6 p.m. here. That's it.
We're now on the public comment portion of our agenda. This is where anyone can get up and tell us anything or bring anything to our attention that is not otherwise on the agenda for discussion. Okay, hearing nothing. I don't believe that there's any new business. We'll go to approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. Approval of a few sets of minutes.
Move to approve.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of treasury warrants and payroll warrants.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of pending contracts. Does anyone have any questions on the contracts?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Citizen departmental requests, Finance Department. Shall we reference the motion?
Good evening. Yes. So last week we sold 4 series of bonds, one permanent taxable financing, a tax exempt financing. The permanent financing was for the construction of the new landfill. The tax exempt permanent financing was primarily made up of the school and some water company projects. And then we sold 2 series of bond anticipation notes that we've taken through June 1st of 2018, a taxable portion which comprises some airport projects and a tax exempt portion which was primarily the sewer projects. So the vote and the results of the sale are incorporated into the vote that you can make reference to, and hopefully will pass a favorable motion.
Someone want to make that motion?
I move approval of the, as written. In our packet. Dated November 15th. You're welcome.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one quick question, Brian, before you go. It's interesting, how come the interest rates in the out years drop? Like, why do they structure it that way?
You know, we've asked Cinder that multiple times, and it's just kind of they're trying to capture their money up front, and then they're willing to take a lower interest rate and hold it long. They're getting most of it up front is basically where it comes down to. We've seen that with pretty much everything that we've sold recently. I will note, since you asked this question, these results that we got out of this were some of the most favorable that they had seen recently in sales, so we did very well.
Yeah, no, and I know we did that. It's just
Yeah.
interesting how
Yeah.
they structured it.
So.
Thanks.
Okay, under public hearings, we'll open the public hearing to determine tax allocation by classification, percentage of residential exemption, for the purpose of extending. Hi.
Hi, Dawn. I just wanted to let you know that our values were approved yesterday. However, we didn't have sufficient time to prepare anything for tonight, so that's why I've requested that you move it to the 29th.
Excellent, thank you. Somebody want to make that motion?
Okay, a motion that we move this to the November 29th meeting?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, public hearing to consider expanding the senior citizen taxi rates on Town of Nantucket taxi rates. We did have a proposal in our packet of a $2 across the board decrease for senior citizens. Is there anyone here who wants to speak about this? Okay, hearing nothing, we'll close the public hearing.
I'll speak. I think their offer was great. I think it's sort of how it's supposed to work, and I'd like to move that we approve it.
I'll second.
Okay,
As recommended.
as recommended by the Taxi Association. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, Housing Nantucket. Presentation of affordable housing education reference document. We might be moving faster than anticipated. Do we want to move on to the transportation planner to go over the in-town bike path? And then we'll come back to Housing Nantucket?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No PowerPoint presentation. I just wanted to give an update as requested and note that the first phase of the in-town bike path was built. Construction was a success. Construction, just so everyone is aware, started with a notice to the abutters on December 30th and construction started in early January 2017. And it was finalized following a walkthrough on October 5th. 2017. There is an issue with the transition of the bike lanes to the existing share of the road configuration, and that's being addressed by the Department of Public Works next week before the holiday. As far as the future phases, which I think is the crux of what you really wanted an update on, there was funding that was approved for FY17 at the 2016 annual town meeting. That's going to be exercised soon. The first step to that, Remain Nantucket's offered to verify the conceptual strategy for implementing the in-town bike path along the sections of Washington Street and Orange Street. There was a January 2007 conceptual study that was done that was accepted by the county commissioners for bike lanes along Washington Street
can
and
I
Orange
just-
Street. And
Can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Absolutely.
I see some people that might have been here for the taxi that look like they maybe wanted to say something,
Oh,
just in the back. Did they want to speak about the taxis? We moved really fast. We approved what you requested. Okay, just. Oh. It's too late for that.
Yeah, the public hearing was closed.
The public hearing's been closed. Sorry. Okay, sorry, Mike.
no, that's
Just
all
saw
right.
some commotion in the back.
So, like I was saying, there was a conceptual study that was accepted by the county commissioners January 2007, and there's a map that's being projected there showing essentially it is consider utilizing bike lanes along both sides of Washington and Orange Street, similar to the existing configuration along Orange Street between Goose Pond Lane and Spruce Street. Remain Nantucket, as I mentioned, is sponsoring a review of those conceptual options, as well as to look at long-term connections for an off-road bike facility utilizing land bank property that's along most of the corridor. That review which it will involve some public outreach with stakeholders and the public, and ultimately it would come to this board for acceptance. But that should be completed by March 2018. So a fairly short turnaround for that review. And then as soon as that the design recommendations from that effort is accepted by the Board of Selectmen, then the actual engineering will initiate on at least a portion of the future phases of that project. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about that process, the existing first phase construction.
I'm happy to hear that they're looking at the sort of the land bank and the off street for that section if possible, even if that requires. I think it should be a priority. And it's funny, I looked through all the different studies, and I remember something 20, 25 years ago that was drawn, going from Goose Pond back along behind Marine and coming out through those properties, and I couldn't find it anywhere anymore. So it's in a study somewhere, but it wasn't in the ones I was looking at. But I'm glad to hear you guys are looking at it. I think it's, if we want, and I think these things should get, if we're gonna be doing major overrides, I think these need to be at the front of the queue. If we want to get people out of their cars coming downtown, we need to give them a safe way to do so. And so I don't think I would like to see, if we're looking at other, overrides, I'd like to see these tucked in so that they're, as soon as you're ready to do them, I'd like to see them done. Because otherwise, we can't go 10 more years waiting for those and hoping they get done. I think it should be a priority, so.
I would just note that Remain Nantucket's been a very good partner in this whole process. I mean, this project aligns with their goals of ensuring the vitality of downtown. So they're a good partner to help contribute to a lot of these efforts.
Yeah, we're lucky they're here.
Madam Chair. Yeah, I just want to agree with you, Matt. This should be a high priority for us. It is the biggest last connector from getting downtown to the majority of the bike paths. And so I also would like to, I don't know what we have to do to be ready. So when the design is there and the stakeholders are brought in and there's been community outreach that we're ready to go, ready to fund it.
Okay.
It's the last big piece. It's really important. I walked around with, is it VHB?
Yes.
VHB. We walked the whole corridor, biked and walked it. It was really interesting that this is doable. Orange Street probably quicker than Washington for the short term package, but it is doable.
you spend a lot of time on your bike trips. How about going out toward Cisco and Cliff Road, those areas like Nantucket? Nantucket, if you go to the top of Maine, is okay. Look, I'm going asking about the other bike routes. Are there any others that need our attention? Wind Street?
I mean, connecting
Yeah.
Nantucket, so
What else, what I'm just sort of asking, what
Yeah.
else are on the priority list? Or what would you think, Mike, are on the priority list?
Well, a lot of the efforts are somewhat funded, at least design is funded. The in-town, the future phases of the in-town project are a big bite at the apple. But there are other projects that have design and construction funded. That would be the Mill Hill path that would connect the stub along Prospect Street over to the Milk Street, Hummock Pond area. The Wind Street component of that would link in with the Nantucket to that Mill Hill Prospect Street area. Once the Wind Street and the Mill Hill path are in place, that will give a connection, a seamless, unbroken bike facility from Nantucket all the way out to Sconset. So that would improve one connection. As far as going into town, I mean, the in-town bike path is already there. The town's implementing and maintaining a system of bike stencils through the old historic district. So that's how that's being addressed. And there's also conceptual ideas for extending the Cliff Road path even further, but that would likely be in the form of a sidewalk, extending that path in the form of a sidewalk and then sharing the road. So that would be the connection on the north side of town. But,
One of the old plans had, and it looked like Roger Young probably drew it. They had a bike path going out to Eel Point, through Dionis and out to Eel Point and then out to Nantucket that direction, which is kind of interesting. And that was in one of the earliest plans, was they were going to connect it all the way around, which was pretty amazing. I'm not saying that's a priority.
Okay. So if there's consensus of the board that the in-town bike path projects are a priority, then the staff will put that in consideration. I'm sure all the committees that we have to work with will keep that into consideration as well, because I mean, there are a huge, the pipeline of projects. So it is helpful to have guidance on what should be the priority.
I think it's been an ongoing theme for the past couple of years or few years to make those in-town connections.
Very good.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you.
For coming.
thanks, Mike. Sorry, I have no.
Is housing Nantucket here yet?
No.
Okay.
I have no thing on my microphone, so I'm gonna try to keep it away.
I guess we'll skip forward to talk about our island home.
Good.
Did Dave want to make some
Want me
comments?
to just kick it off, or me just?
Did you have some comments you wanted to make? No. I'm just putting you right on the spot.
So I think I asked to have this on the agenda. I appreciate the board taking the time to really think about what's the best way forward. We've had some time to think about the article that was not passed. It was at the last town meeting to replace our island home in property adjacent to Sherburne Commons, and but I think we all, I don't not speak, but speaking for myself, the issues remain about the challenges of the facility, and also I think certainly my commitment, and I'm here, I think others, to the residents of the island home and families and people that will need that service in the future. So I just thought we'd have a conversation about what perhaps some next steps are. And we've seen, gosh, we had hundreds of pages of documentation that we read, and it was interesting to go back all the way back to our Island Home Work Group in 2013 and even earlier to hear some of that history. So I don't know if we want to just have a conversation among ourselves. I do know that Dave, you have some comments. I don't know if you want to raise those or.
Dave Fredericks. I guess I have a few comments. I was the chairman of the building committee, and it kind of grew into a review of everything the town had done. We put together what was ultimately the report of the presentation of the town meeting, and I wasn't able to be there. So, I listened to people afterwards and so on. And my comments really start with the first point, which is it's an extremely complicated issue. And I find that it's difficult through 15-minute presentations once every 6 or 8 weeks for the selectmen to wrap their head around it. It's even more difficult for the average citizen once or twice a year to hear something about it and somehow to be able to make an informed vote. I think it's borders on insanity to go to town meeting and in 5 minutes explain something that took me hundreds of hours to even remotely understand. And compared to Rachel, I'm a 1 and she's a 10. And so it strikes me that if we want to go forward, we need a slow march through a lot of complicated issues. And we need to find a way to make those issues understandable. We need a way to make those issues transparent so there's trust, because there was certainly a lack of trust for some reason. Maybe because sometimes we don't like what we hear, so we don't want to trust, but whatever the reason may be. So I look at it and I had really 4 thoughts, and first being quality of care, and the reality that we're losing staff's retiring. No one wants to come here and take the really higher position jobs, and we need a very specific plan, like we do the facility, which is the second issue. We needed this short-term plan to keep the facility safe and manageable. We're rebidding, as for people that know, we're rebidding some of the things because the bid we put out went higher than the appropriation. And the reality is we're really down to 1 shower. We're down to a lot of things that we should be worried about. But that rolls into the third bucket, which is a financial issue. And I think that's an example where the board, I think, can take the lead a couple different ways. These are my opinions. I don't represent the committee. One of the simplest ways to do this is that every 3 months, Brian Turbott gives us a really serious look at where are we financially. Not because I want people to be scared. I want people to be informed, so when we do bring something forward, talking about the finances is easy because we've made it a topic we talk about so frequently that we've gotten the questions out of the way. I even think the town should consider doing it as an override on an annual town meeting, because we need to have that discussion so when these things come up, people can put the pieces together. Think about the number of issues that we tried to roll out at town meeting tying this decision together. So we have to find a way to communicate these kinds of 4 issues. The last is this whole ugly debate about location. We need to make that part of the exact, and those 4 things, if we get the public to be fully educated. I don't care, and I said this when we did the report, there was no one on my committee that cared if we stayed in the location it was or we went to another location. Financially, it made more sense to us to be relocated. From a storm surge safety standpoint, it made more sense. But we did believe when we got done, it could stay there. Our island home, again, for those who don't remember, would have to be shrunk to 30 beds. We would have to take it apart in small pieces and rebuild it. But that by itself is a complicated issue. And so my challenge to the board is, how do we build a long-term education so we're not rehashing every one of the same facts repeatedly? Because there's so many of them, you end up down a rabbit hole and you never get back to the big question, which is the facility is getting old. It's coming up on some real long-term major shifts in how it's used, either driven by regulation or by the financial issues that have to be addressed within the facility. And yet most citizens can barely wrap their head around any one of the 4 buckets of issues that I was bringing up. So I would urge you to look at ways to take those 4 buckets and use your forum to bring the light clearly on those. I think there are solutions. I think there are solutions that the community is willing to fund. But I think that the idea that we're going to go do another grand study and somehow give them all this information and they're going to interpret it is not real. I think it's more information than most people can wrap their heads around. And so I'd urge you to think about, like I said, things like the financials, having Brian do them, having some group that's just looking at what the locations may be. The word operating model, I'm going to throw out, I would get rid of that. We're going to build a facility that works for Nantucket that isn't as institutionalized as we may be used to, because we are hung up on the words rather than what the intent was, which was to improve care and help manage cost. So the other thing we have to learn to do is talk, and I think that's one of the problems. We tried to take this horribly complicated issue and explain it in 5 minutes on town meeting.
Okay. Does anybody want to go? I can go.
So, I like those, I like the concept of the 4 buckets. That helped me kind of, think about things, it's more simply. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks about that.
I think that we need to discuss what we can do in the current location. We don't have another location, and what we can do to keep this facility running. I think we need to look at financial implications of a decrease in the number of residents, so that and a design and phasing plan to figure out how we could take off parts of the building or substantially renovate parts of the building while other parts of the building are still occupied. I think we probably need at this point to go through the exercise of doing all that design and having a phasing plan so that we can see if the Department of Public Health will approve it. And it's going to cost some money to do that, but that's our only option besides not having a facility anymore. We could also look into further home health care options that the town could somehow supplement. And what else did I want? And we do need to look at the long-term operational, and maybe we do need to consider having it on as a override so that people are commit every year to refunding what it's really going to cost. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. And let me just see if anybody else on the board wants to speak, and then I'll take a few comments from the public. Or do you want to wait to hear public comment?
I would say take the comments.
Okay,
and then
just wanted to give everybody a chance since Jim and I were the only ones. Did you want to say something, Ginger?
Yeah, I think part of the trust issue for me is this emphasis on the storm surge. Because if you look at Nantucket, you can see that the entire island is about to be inundated. We're a heap of sand sitting on top of a lens of fresh water. The whole island is too seismically active for MIT to have an earthquake sensor here. So the question is not, are we all going to wash away? The question is, how fast and from what direction? And the South Shore experiences the highest erosion rate in Massachusetts, which is averaged at 10 feet a year. The North Shore at 3 feet a year, and the harbor itself at 18 inches per year. So I would ask the board to consider, if the storm surge becomes an issue for Island Home, what else will have already gone before it? The ferry docks, C Street, the pumping station, most of town, all of Brant Point, a good deal of Shimo, Cotuh, Great Point, Nantucket. By the time that happens, we're not going to have a town anyway. So for me, the issue is, are we going to be a community that takes care of their elders? And a friend of mine recently said, well, we raise money for the hospital, we raise money for, we raise a lot of money on this island for a lot of issues. Why can't we raise money for the Island Home? And I asked my friends on the Friends of the Island Home nonprofit, well, what could we raise money for? And apparently, we can't raise money to put into a municipal building. For some reason, the rules forbid that. But, I mean, I, for one, would think that we need to look and discuss for ways of getting more of the community, some of which is very wealthy, involved in, some of these issues. And I still maintain that care comes from people, not from buildings, and that the staffing issues and the housing issues. No one said these problems are simple, but they will all take money to resolve. And I think whether it comes from the town budget or we find ways to seek private donors, that's part of the conversation, an important part. So that's my piece.
Allison?
Hello, my name is Allison Forsgren. I came upon the whole island home situation as a caregiver, as the daughter of two people who ended up spending time there. And we had looked at other places off island and actually bought a house that had a department for 24-hour care. And none of that ended up turning out to be what we needed at the end. And how I look at it is that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be in my shoes that live here, used to live here, wanted to live here, that are going to be running through the same issues. And having a skilled nursing facility, sadly, it has to be municipally owned because no one else will take it over. But it has to be a priority, and it will help all of our community, especially moving forward, with the care of people who can't safely live at home. And, I fully support aging in place. I think people should be able to stay in their homes as long as possible, but when it's not safe, there has to be a place, to move them. Finding a different location, modifying the plan of, the care plan. We have a group of people, and I spend a great deal of time at the island home, and it's a fabulous group of residents who I mostly know from different walks of life, having lived here for some time, as well as the nurses. And I don't think we need to recreate that much. We just need to support, and as a municipally owned facility, it has to be the town that does it. What's going to happen to these people? And I don't know if decreasing the number of beds on a temporary basis, I don't understand the financials. I know a lot of people there that pay $15,000 a month, and I know it does cost a lot to run the facility, and it would be interesting to find out what the individual financial burden would be for every taxpayer to guarantee that we have something, whether it's a $3 million overage at the end of the year, or, what are people willing to pay to have that type of security for people that they love and care for? So I don't know what the situation is. I'm happy to, I'm on the building committee as well. I would love to find another location, but I think we need to pursue something sooner rather than later because of all of the issues with the building. The staffing issues and the retirement issues are throughout the town. It's not something that, the island home is unique, is in a unique position for, but let's look for another spot. Anything we can, so, thank you.
Maria?
I think the first gentleman articulated a lot of what the problem is. Not getting the public on board, not educating them enough. Other entities in town have a board of directors where key people are part of the process. I don't know if that would help. Definitely more information out there. It is a very complex issue, and those of us that are lay people really need some education on these things. And I think the town has said loud and clear that they do want a skilled nursing facility on the island. And whatever we have to do it and make it work, I think that they've said that to you. But you've got to be more open, more transparent. There's a lot of misinformation floating around, and that's not helpful. And I think you have also a lot of expertise maybe within the community themselves that you can tap into to find a board of directors that can really support the administrator and the staff. It's just an idea.
Denise Cronow. How many towns in Massachusetts run their own nursing facilities?
2.
2. Who's the other one?
Taunton.
And do they have similar issues?
They've been recommended for closure.
Okay. And the other towns who don't run them, what did they do? Did they go to private companies?
Yes.
And that's off the table for Nantucket? It was voted to always have it be a municipal facility.
I mean, work group after work group has invited folks to come and take it over, and no one will because of the operating losses.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
So, what? Go ahead, or if there's.
Well, if there's no more public comments, I mean, I'm ready to move forward in some way with doing some modeling on what it's going to look like to redo the existing facility and see if we can actually get it approved, because it's not really me saying I don't want it there because of storm surge. We were advised that the Department of Public Health might not approve it, but we can probably we may be able to take off a wing and build it up higher to alleviate that. I don't know. I don't know all of the answers, but I think that we have to do some path forward because everything takes so much time.
I think we've heard a couple. But we've heard a couple things that the state may or may not approve. So that's one of them. And then the other one is, can you do a major construction site and have people still kind of living on the property? And we've heard kind of through back channels that the state won't allow that, but they won't put it in writing until we have a plan, right? A design that costs a lot of money. Am I off on that, Jim?
I don't believe I don't recall the state saying you couldn't renovate in place. We felt that the relocation of 45 residents for 2 years to a location off island
They would approve that.
we just didn't see that as acceptable, because it would, we wouldn't have a nursing home for 2.5 years or 2 years while we're building the replacement, tearing it down and building a new one, even if we worked around the storm surge stuff.
So that's where the phasing comes in to try it. But we will have to freeze bed admissions for a while. There's not another way around it unless we find another location, which we have explored quite extensively and have not found one. Maria? Yeah, but you come to the mic, please.
What about, who owns the land that surrounds Landmark? The town. Okay. So that was very much a sticking point with people in the town. They want to have the facility generally where it is, the ocean view, the aesthetics, whatever. I don't know. I'm not an engineer or an architect, but it seems to me that you might have more footprint in that general area if you thought, extending or using the land near Landmark, or there's 2 buildings there that you could take down that are, I don't know, it looks like storage facilities for our island home. Maybe if that's what's holding the town up from saying, let's build a new facility, if you looked at that land again in a different way to see if it could work there.
That was analyzed quite extensively by the building committee, and it would require the move of Landmark House, which would create a whole nother extensive set of problems because Landmark House is full of residents.
Say that again. Landmark.
Because Landmark House is full of people living there.
Right.
They have a lease.
I don't say move Landmark. I just
And
say
Landmark has a
open
lease.
space.
And it's federally subsidized. So there's just, it brings, there is more footprint, but it's not quite right.
Well, the building committee looked at it, 2 stories and, and leaving it in place and building around it and taking it out and taking half of it off. I mean, there was 3 or 4 different scenarios. I mean, Dave will probably.
Dave, you want to speak
And
to
I
that a
really,
little bit?
and I think really that gets back to the original point, which just this issue alone is so very complicated. We spent a fair amount of time looking at was there a way to fit it in there, and there's a small piece of property between the 2 facilities, and when you looked at the impact of construction, you really still had you were left with, if you wanted a long-term solution, sliding the Landmark House forward, which meant you had to displace them for some period of time. We thought it was 90 days if you were heroic. Realistically, it was 6 months. They have a lease. They've got federal funding that was involved. It wasn't undoable. And we were very clear it could be built on that site. You were left with, you had to displace a certain number of employees. You had to come up with a design that we thought DPH would accept while dealing with storm surge and impact on residents. All manageable issues. We thought it added about a $20 to $25 million premium to the construction cost. It wasn't that it couldn't be done, but I think Dawn's point's valid. People need maybe to see all of that more tangible. And maybe, I grew up in the regulatory world, so I spent 35 years with the utility, and one of the things you learned with regulators on the rate side, and I think all regulators see the world the same, you present me a plan, I give you feedback. What I don't do is your planning for you. And so I might wink at you and smile, say, I don't know that we would like that, but I'm probably not going to say yes or no to you present a well thought out plan. And so they want your commitment and they react to your commitment. I think all the previous studies had indicated if you were looking at it from a money standpoint and impact on citizens, a different location made more sense. Town meeting continues to send a very clear message they prefer that location. Maybe that has to be fully developed. I will tell you that I think that's a big number. It's several $100,000, if not a 6-figure number, or $1 million. But maybe we have to go through that. But as I started out, I still think we need a program where we're continuing to educate nonstop on all the issues without controversy. Here are the financial issues that exist. So when we're ready to decide, we already understand those. We don't have to have a debate. Here's how we want to take care of our elderlies. Here's I hate the word operating model because it starts an argument. Here's how we want to do it on Nantucket, and let's get that over with while we're getting ready to analyze the location. And I do think Dawn's right. I think you end up with some smaller number of beds, and you have to move towards that number. So if you do think you want to go in that direction, the sooner you think about that, the more likely you could have something to do, distasteful as that is. And I don't want anybody to misunderstand how I feel. I didn't get involved in this because I don't care. I believe we owe this to the people of the island. But I do think it's very complicated, and I do think we always have to keep an eye on that, the dollar to the extent that we can.
Madam Chairman, I just want to make a couple of comments. We talk about this all the time in town administration, every week, every day almost. Rachel and I have talked quite a bit lately about this. I've talked with Dave. I've talked with a bunch of people about it. Most recently, and in taking into consideration what some of you have said and what we've heard from the public over the past few months, perhaps picking up on the current site, it seems pretty clear that the voters did not want to move the facility to a different location. So this might sound obvious, or why didn't you already do that? But there's so many moving parts to it. Maybe what we need, and Rachel and I talked about this yesterday, is a firm that specializes in nursing home construction to prepare some kind of a report or a plan for us as to what needs to be done short-term and long-term, and when and how, what the estimated costs are, what the logistics would be to relocate residents, because I think what we have been advised so far is that there will need to be some sort of relocation. Don't know where, don't know how. What are the DPH approvals, requirements, building code, floodplain issues? There is plumbing, heating, ventilation, and ductwork that needs to be done. We have a plan for the electrical, but it's got to get worked in, and it can't be done really by itself. There are room upgrades that are needed. There's a serious storage problem. There are mechanical systems issues. So maybe we need to put out an RFP or do a lot more research than we have been able to do so far about a firm that does that kind of thing. In addition to that, a firm that, and we may already have one that we've worked with before, to do a bed analysis. There are at least 4 types of beds. There's a utilization issue, acuity levels of patients, payer sources, reimbursement trends, what's the budget impact if we're reducing the beds, all of that kind of thing that Rachel could actually probably do if she had nothing else to do. And that is not realistic or possible right now. So that is something we're going to need some professional assistance on. There are regulatory compliance issues that need to be addressed. And lastly, staffing and the collective bargaining agreement that needs to be worked with. So all of those things, and it's kind of goes along with some of the items that Dave said, need to be tackled by really experts in those areas. So I'm sure we could put together some kind of a plan for that, but I think as what Dave said as well, there's going to be a pretty significant cost to this. And we can start looking at that now, but it is going to take a little time. But it does get at keeping the facility where it is and how that would be feasible.
When I hear, I've lived in a couple of houses while we were renovating, and when I hear that for this facility, I don't see, maybe it's possible, but I just, it's very traumatic. It was traumatic, for Sheila and I at 30-something years old to live in that. I can't imagine trying to keep a clean, well-run facility in the midst of rewiring an entire building, replumbing an entire building, changing all the heat and everything. I just don't get it. But, I think we can do that. All that said, I think that the staffing, I run a business and I know how difficult it is here to get and retain employees and do it in a cost-effective manner. So a sandwich isn't $300. I wonder, I still think that that's the elephant in the room. We could get an override and we could build the most beautiful building in the world, and 10 years from now, we might not have anyone that wants to work there. So, and if we don't get the needed changes and negotiate the changes to be able to house people and do other aspects of it, we're out of business. And so I just think that we can do this plan, and I'd probably vote for it tonight, but I think that has to be following fairly closely behind, because I think Dave hit the 4 main points. If any one of those doesn't work, if the financials don't work and get voted, if the staffing doesn't work, if the facility doesn't work, if any one of those trips us up, we're done. And I think that's what people have to realize. This is a serious, serious situation that, we have to figure out as a community how to come together and solve it. And if we keep going back and rehashing sort of old battles, we're going to be out of the business. We're going to be taunted. And I'm not saying that as a threat. I'm just saying that as the reality. We've been talking about it for 15 years. This really, in my mind, is a last gasp to save this thing. And I think we need to have a skilled nursing facility here, but we need to figure out how to come together as a community to do that, whether it's on that site or somewhere else. And we may get some answers along the way we don't want to hear. We may have to accept them and just, it may not be what we all want exactly the way we want, but we need to, we need to move on or we're going to be closed. And I'm just saying that completely as someone who's looked at everything and been involved. So.
Hi, my name's Kevin Komak. I'm the director over at Sherburne Commons. I'm a little late to the game, but I've been here for a year, and I wanted to support one of the things that Libby said. I think one of the things that I haven't heard since I've been here in the last year is a real look at who are the people that we're serving at our island home. Because it's expensive to take care of nursing home patients. But at least from my very limited knowledge of the folks that we take care of at our island home, I think a number of them don't necessarily need to be there. They need to be served, and we need to figure out where they need to be served. But because nursing homes are so regulated and take care of people that need skilled services, they're expensive. So I think, the suggestion that Libby made, and I don't necessarily think that piece is all that expensive, to just do an analysis of who's there. And if there wasn't a nursing home, where would they be and how would they be taken care of? I think what we really need to be looking at is what kind of services do each one of those people need. Right now, the hospital takes care of skilled patients at the hospital. The way that their beds work, they can take care of skilled patients there. So maybe there's a way to find how do you take care of the people at the lower end of the acuity scale. And that'll truly give you an idea of how many beds that you really need. And then you can look at whether or not you need to build a 40-bed building or a 60-bed building. But I think to be talking about building the building before looking at who and what you really need to serve is kind of putting the cart before the horse. That's really a quick analysis. It can be done by somebody that's been in the industry for a little while. I think you could find somebody that could go in there and take a look and say, 10 of these people could be served in a group home that has 2 staff members as opposed to having 4 aides and skilled nurses around the clock. So I would suggest that you take that one step first and do an analysis of what do we really need here. And there really is a reason that the for-profits and the not-for-profits have not come here to do a nursing home. They don't see a financially viable model here. They just don't see enough people that need to be taken care of to make it worth their while to bring those services here. So I think what you need to do is figure out who do we need to take care of, and if we were starting from scratch, where would they be? And then decide what you need to build for those folks. Thanks.
But before Kevin leaves, if I may, Kevin, could you, I know you, but I think it's helpful for people to understand, when I got involved in this, I ran electric companies. I didn't do this for a living. I think it's worth Kevin giving you 2 seconds of his background because he may be, like Rachel, the only person in the room that actually has a complete understanding of the program. So at least 2 minutes of where you've been before you came here.
Well, I've been a nursing home administrator for 25 years, and so I had to make most of that was working for the for-profits, and you had to make a bottom. You couldn't lose money because you went out of business. So, we had to figure that out. And, most of the time we took really good care of our residents, but it was really looking at that bottom line and figuring out staffing. And the bottom line is I think the only reason that folks are in the nursing home at Nantucket is there's no place else for some of those folks to go. In a community that's got other services, they find other places for them to go. And so, again, like David alludes to, I think we need to look at that. I think that's the one, I think, I love being a nursing home administrator. I think it's a great thing. And people that are at nursing homes that need care in nursing homes, we do great stuff. And everything I hear about the Ireland home, other than the fact that the place sounds like it's fallen down, is that we do a great job of taking care of the people there. And I think we'll continue to have staff that are willing to do that. But we have to have the right people taking care of the right people in the right place. And we have to move the people that don't need to be there to places that cost half or a third as much to take care of them. That's why assisted living and independent living is so great now, because basically what it does is it says you don't need 5 staff to take care of somebody that just needs a little bit of supervision. So maybe there's some options that we could figure out here, and then we could build a smaller nursing home, or we could attach it to the hospital, or attach it to someplace else. So.
Yeah, I do think Kevin, I think in some of our studies, I think if we got you some of the studies, I think they did outline the different levels of care, and I think some of the projections, I think Rachel could update them, but I think we came out around 25, 30 beds with some of the others that don't need that level of care. So I do think it's been looked at.
The last recommendation was 30 skilled nursing beds and then 10 level 4 beds.
Yeah.
And I'm not an expert on it, but I would think that those 10 level 4 beds could be served in a different way or in a different building, something potentially.
They can be taken care of just as well, and probably at about a quarter of the cost as well.
Ella?
I'd just like to point out that for my reading of that study that we're basing, I'm Ella Finn, I'm the director at Landmark House and a nurse. The one thing to point out is that study that we're basing our chat around here with regard to the numbers of beds that might be required. As I read it, those numbers pertained to when the study was done, 2015 to 2020. But the demographics that went along with that study showed that the age group that primarily uses the services, requires the skilled services of the nursing home, is going to just about double in the years 2020 to 2030. So with regard to long-range planning, people are living longer on Nantucket. We certainly have a great lifestyle and tend to be fairly healthy. I think that's where we need to look. My understanding also is that once one gives up a certified nursing bed, if you drop from 45 down to 30, I believe it's quite difficult to get that certification back. So, I'd be reluctant to give anything up at that level until the study was used as it was done. I thought it was very limiting just using figures up to 2020 when it was clear that the explosion in that demographic happened afterwards. The other thing to recognize is that the general public doesn't understand that, may not understand completely, that skilled nursing care requires a skilled nursing need, requires the person who needs it to be in that care and supervised for 24 hours a day by a skilled nurse, not by a CNA. You can do that in other sorts of environments. The hospital has a very interesting and outside the box thinking around staffing right now. And that is they're bringing nurse practitioner students to come and service our primary care doctors in their offices to do clinicals, so that the doctors have more staff that they will supervise, and we have more people that will see us. More often than not, one is seen by a nurse practitioner or a PA now, not your primary care physician, just because they're stretched too much. I think that's something to explore. The other thing is home health care, and the notion of aging in place is wonderful, but most of the people, I grant that there are some at the nursing home who maybe don't quite meet that standard. Most of the people who get home care don't need 24-hour care, and most of the people who live at our island home do require it and cannot get that at home. And again, it's skilled care. It's not the care of a CNA, a nursing assistant. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Yes. Hi, Fran.
I'm Frances Kartinen. My husband has been at our island home for somewhat over 2 years, and I spend approximately 7 hours a day, 7 days a week at our island home, keeping my husband company and making myself useful. Once a week I produce an interactive slideshow for the residents. So I know them all. I see them every day. I look around the people who are having this discussion. I don't see you there. I don't think you know the residents, but I want to tell you, I cannot think of a single current resident of our island home who does not need to be there. We keep our residents, our family members at home until it is no longer safe for them to be at home. We only relinquish them to our island home when we can no longer care for them at home with the help of hired CNAs who come for some hours a day, or even 24-hour help at home from one person, because there comes a point when many of our elders require skilled nursing care 24 hours a day, and that is where our island home comes in. There aren't people there who could do well in assisted living. They're beyond assisted living. They aren't people who could be served by visits to their home for 15 to 30 minutes a day, even every day of the week. These people need somebody in the middle of the night. They need somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning. They need somebody after supper. There has to be somebody there, not somebody who might come to their home. And not just CNAs. They need nursing care. Each and every one of them. I can't think of a soul there who is simply there because there's no place else for them to be. The other thing I want to say is this idea of education. The Board of Selectmen worked enormously hard last year to educate the voting public about their plan. And the public listened. And the public said, that's not what we want to spend $30 million on. So the idea that you could educate us more to a plan that doesn't fit Nantucket's idea of what they want for their elders seems to me misguided. I think it's really necessary that the Board of Selectmen and everybody else listen to Nantucketers. Thank you.
I think we're trying to listen, and that's why we're trying to discuss figuring out some way to rebuild on site. But we all have to be realistic that it's going to cost more money, and it's a 2.5 acre site. The rooms are too small. If we rebuild and bring up to current codes, we have to fit within our parameters, and that's the reason why we're discussing that we might need to decrease beds. Not because that's what we want to do, it's the way to fit it on this site. There are implications, there are reasons why we proposed a larger new site. So we can do it in some way, I believe, if we can get it permitted. But there are going to be certain ramifications. We can't have it everything that we want, and it's very, very difficult to try and make these decisions.
Hi there. Again, I looked at the model of care, the small house model, and I think everything about it was great. What I heard back from people when I was talking to them in the community was that it looked like we were building another temple or another huge municipal facility that may or may not be completely thoroughly utilized. And so I think that if we look at what we need and look at what we have and not try to change things immeasurably, I mean, each wing on our island home is basically a small house, only they don't have they have a shared kitchen. Not everyone needs or wants a private room. So we should look at what, how we're reimbursed and who's willing to pay. I mean, a lot of people pay for their accommodations there. Maybe they could choose to have a room with a view or something. I mean, I don't really know how the whole repayment part works, but I think we could re-examine the square footage that we need, the staffing that we need, and come up with something that's a smaller square footage plan that would cover what we need as far as supporting the 45 residents that we currently have beds for.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about all of the rooms becoming private. It's that the rooms are too small.
Right.
The beds are up against the walls, and it's...
Yeah, but you could have a share. I mean, I've looked at, plans where you could have a semi-shared bath and people would have a room. I mean, I've examined actual floor plans and visited sites that we could use as an example rather than trying to, build something that's too large or too, from what we need. We could look at what other people have done to solve some of these problems, not only in Massachusetts, but in Finland and in Scandinavia, where people are dealing with their seniors at a different, in a different way. So I'm all for that.
One thing I did want to, someone mentioned not being able to donate to the town, and I think that's incorrect. I think that if there were a board together and they raise money, I'm pretty sure they can donate, and we can accept them. We accept them at the beginning of these meetings. So, am I correct on that? Someone?
Yeah, I don't know where that is coming from.
Yeah, no, so if there were a group that wanted to do Friends of Island Home and raise, and there is a group, and if they raised $50 million, they could donate it to the town, and that would offset the cost. I mean, so there isn't, that we are not precluded from doing that. If there's a group that feels really strongly and wants to do that, I think it would be great. But that's, that is not against the law, let's put it that way.
They do not support us spending money on capital improvements when
So I think we're falling a little bit into a problem-solving mode, which is important. And I think, Dawn, your suggestion of starting to look at the details of what it would look like to rebuild on site, I think that's a good step forward. But I think what Dave was saying really struck a note, the idea of a long, slow march and the 4 buckets. And I think that the 4 buckets even could be a little bit broader, and I think it feels like we're missing a bit of a North Star. So we're looking at all these facts and things we're worried about and trying to problem solve without really having an idea of, or a defined idea of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and then how we're going to do it. And I think we're jumping towards the where, and we're trying to figure it out there. But I think even now, we still haven't even answered, what are we doing? Okay, so we're going to rebuild on site. Maybe, but what are we going to do? And then when we decide what we're going to do, why are we doing it? Why are we considering losing beds? And I think that can be looked at on the site that we have, but I think if we don't look at it at the bigger level, that doesn't necessarily take into account where it is right now, then we're going to fall back into the same trap. And I think that Dave's comments again on those 4 buckets sort of touch on that. What is the quality of care? Who are we providing for? What is the sort of time frame that we're looking at and the demographics, and how could we supplement it? How could we have synergies? I think, Denise's question brings up Denise is not the only one that is asking, why are we in the business? And I think that, if people are still asking that, then we haven't made a case for the what and the why. And I think that it's easier to focus on the immediate and try and problem solve. But I think that we can end up in the same position we are today. And I also think that it's possible that there may be some obstacles, regulatory, logistical, or financial, that we hit somewhere along the way. And if we don't have that North Star of what we're doing and why, then those can potentially be obstacles that cost us a lot of time. And time that might mean the difference between being able to keep the facility open or not. But I just think that, again, we're falling into the same pattern of conversation. And I think, again, looking at the spot is a good step forward, but I don't think we should discount the idea of that bigger conversation being very clear about what we're doing and why.
So just a quick comment. It's always impressed me that this community has been willing to lose $2 or $3 million to even talk about having a $30, $40 million nursing home built. I don't think any other communities do that. So we do take care of our own, and we are willing to do it. In April, whether it was trust or it was confusion, we weren't there yet. But I think people are willing to spend the money. It wasn't a 90-10. It didn't fail. 90% voted against it. It was pretty close in the 50s. So there were, even with the mistrust and maybe confusion, there were still 40-ish, I don't know what the number was, so 45, 55. 45% of people were willing to go forward with this, with the My Comment site. So I agree with you, Don, of let's have 2 parallel tracks. The current one we're on, of fixing it up as we are, and trying to find more appropriations for doing what we're going to do. At the same time, whether that brings in determination of needs study, I don't know where this falls in to these 2 parallel tracks. And then what you're suggesting is going forward and spending the money. Because I think if you have a choice of, all right, we can do this on the site we want for $50 million or 40, but the residents have to leave for 2 years. And we figured everything else versus something else. It's easier to make a decision when you know the state will allow this, the state will know what it will cost. So if we do make a motion tonight I would support going forward with this parallel track of seeing what it's going to cost and other designs. Some of your suggestions, Libby, I don't know exactly how that would work.
I was just going to say, I would suggest or recommend maybe what some people have said is going back to the beginning of who are we serving, how are we serving them, what types of beds do we need, how many do we need, what are the demographics, that sort of a look before we start designing anything. But with the idea that when we get to that point, we would be designing at the current site and would have to sort out all those obstacles.
So this would be a parallel track, right? Two things kind of going in motion.
And I think a lot of that has been done. I think it may need to be updated, but I think a lot of that is actually done. And I think the numbers that you're talking aren't wrong, Jason. I think 50 million, people not there for 2 or 3 years, with it growing about $1 million a year in debt is probably what we're looking at. In 30 million, in another site it was 30 million with everyone staying in place, and it was going to be done a year or two quicker. That was all sort of laid out as well. Right. So those were the two choices. I don't think that they were clear I don't think we had them, on a fact sheet clear to the community, but that was kind of what we were talking about last year.
Well,
so,
I don't think we can actually discuss, it's not realistic to have no residents on island, to have no facility here for 2 years. We have to, if we're going to do it, we have to figure out what it's going to cost to phase it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a different.
I mean,
but
it will mean some less beds at some periods in time, but to have no facility here is just not, it's not an option to me.
Okay.
And that's the why. The North Star and the why is that having a skilled nursing facility on Nantucket, because when we need it, we really need it. And we have to get moving on something or we're going to get closed. I mean, and it's not a threat. It's just it takes so long to get anything done that we can't afford to not move forward in some way, because this planning could take 3 years just to get there.
So I think just, when he first started saying this, I was just like, it seems so unrealistic. But Dave, from the beginning, said anything's possible. Anything's possible. We can do anything. And I'm like, yeah, but some of those things are, don't seem to be the best path. And that's why I think we came to the conclusions we did about, replacing it at another site. So it's possible to do something on that site that would, over time, end up with a skilled nursing facility. And then I think, the process of identifying the implications of that are probably pretty important. There's cost implications, there's reimbursement implications during that. And there's also, so is there a difference between, I know there's a numerical difference, but what is the difference from the impact on the community of saying, well, for 2 years, we're only going to have 20 residents versus 0 residents? So those are all things we'd have to figure out. And it may be worth doing, but it's a different prism than we had before, which was trying to put everything together in a package that wasn't supported at town meeting. If we take the view of, all right, what's it going to take to do something on the current site? That would be, and if that could be your North Star. That could be to provide as many services as we can to that community. That could be that could be our focus, and saying that anything's possible. So,
I think that's been really interesting, Jim, to what you were saying. Kevin's comment on all the different types of people that are using our facility, and that's why it's most likely not like a nursing home in Taunton, because we're sort of a catch-all. And I think that is, for me, that is a big question, is if we're discussing that we may have to consider dropping the beds, but there's a need. How do we accommodate for Nantucket, the community on Nantucket, in the context of Nantucket?
We do still have the ability to build at Sherburne Commons also, but
I just have one more comment. Our Island Home sort of is like the VA hospital, it's sort of like the psychiatric hospital, it's sort of like the hospice, it's sort of, a lot of the people that join there, mostly for short term, are there for, or some for long term, for reasons other than just skilled nursing. If we had a VA hospital, or if we had a psychiatric hospital, or a geriatric, anything else, the population would probably be better served. But we only have one place. The new hospital is not, has not really addressed, to my knowledge, any geriatric care. I mean, they have sort of left that to the town to deal with because we have a municipally owned nursing facility. So that's sort of, I completely understand the municipal part and how unique that is. And it's a problem. It's a consideration for our town to look at. But somebody said to me during one of my discussions, well, why don't they move the residents into the hospital before they tear the old building down? And I think that there may be people in the community that we could harness for ideas if we left it open for suggestion. And I think that might be something we could look to, is what people who are learning more and more about the situation, because people are aging and their parents are under situations. I mean, people are getting older, and people like us are dealing with their parents and what to do with them. And if we could harness some of those ideas, I think it would be helpful for the whole town. So I don't know how to do that, but.
Madam Chair, do you want more discussion, or do you want a motion?
If you're ready to make a motion,
Go
for it.
No problem.
My name is Darcy Creech, and I just wanted to say, I think it was really clear at town meeting that what the Nantucketers want is they want a solution for Island Home to be kept on its current location, whether that means making it 2 stories, if it's going to cost $10 million more. I think that people, that's what they want, and if it's going to cost more, that's what they want. They also want a guarantee that they're not going to dump $30 or $50 million into a new facility that can be privatized. That was a big issue. There was never any guarantee that all the money that was being putting in could, that it could possibly become a private operation, and that's a problem. But I think it's really clear that people want a real viable plan. Anything's possible on that location, and they want to know what the cost is. And I'm confident that people will step up to the plate. It's the taxpayers that are paying for it. It should be our decision. And I think that that's the proposal that people want to see, or we're going to be running around in circles again at the next town meeting. And there's probably been 6 people who have passed away at Island Home since April. There's 6 beds, and just to not take new people on. We're losing time. We're losing time every day to make this work, and to make it work in a timely manner. Thank you.
Do you want to make a motion?
I'll start off a motion, and then we can edit it. Make a motion to go forward with looking at who does it serve, whether that's a consultant or hiring somebody to do that. I don't know, to design on the current site with phases. We'll just start there. That's too broad, I know, but I just want to get things moving.
Libby, I think you get the gist of what we're looking for. How do you want to?
Well, I would start with the who does it serve analysis kind of a thing, and there probably is a lot of existing information. It could be more sort of packaged in a plan-like way with a look at the demographics more on a long-term basis, and maybe that could be done relatively quickly in the next few months, hopefully. And then maybe we bring that back, or we bring back updates as we go, and then we go to the current site with phases, or maybe work into the motion that the intent would be, at this point anyway, pending the outcome of the who does it serve study, the intent would be that a renovated or new facility would be intended to be occurring at the current site.
Yeah,
And what the
only-
implications of that are.
Yeah, and then, I mean, the one last step would be if it does mean losing beds, to maintain those beds, would we want to look at building a separate building elsewhere, like the land that we are able to at Sherburne Commons, like a level 4 separate facility? I mean, I know that this is all, we're talking tens of millions of dollars here, but I think we need to present all the options because, like it's been said, it's the taxpayers who decide whether they want to pay for it or not.
And again, that's
And
my concern.
we have to have all of the options.
Yeah, I think we need the options, but my concern from a taxpayer, it's one thing to get a vote at town meeting and to get your 2/3 or your 50% with everyone looking at each other eye to eye, and you're and we all, and everyone feels strongly. It's a whole different thing if we're putting something, a 50 or $100 million, over 20 or 30 years to the voters. They're going to go into the ballot box and they're going to do something different. So my concern is that we do this as worrying about the service number one to the residents, but then figuring out how to make sure that we do this as fiscally responsible as possible. Because if we can't say that to the voters, they'll all say yes at town meeting and vote no at the ballot box. Or the economy will shift. This will take us 3 years, and the economy will have shifted a hair. And remember what those votes were. When we were in a down situation, we got no support. So I'm not as, I am, while I agree that the town meeting wanted it in the existing site, and I agree that if we can do that, we should do that. But if it's going to come with a huge price tag, we better be careful. That's all.
Well, we know it's going to.
We know it's gonna cost more.
We have those numbers.
10 million is one thing, 30
No, it's
million is
20.
another.
Well, it was a lot more than.
People will see that.
It was a 25% premium, and the price goes up between $846,000 and $1.7 million a year, depending on what inflation rate you pick. So, and that's why I said, I think we have to go into this, I have to go into this knowing that if we say anything's possible, then we'll come up with a plan. But there has all those other, we can't do both. I'm not smart enough to say, okay, we're going to do anything possible, but we also want to be fiscally responsible. We don't want to move any people off island. We can't, I can't solve for that equation, personally. I'm not smart enough.
Hopefully we'll hire someone that is, because I'm not either, so.
Local input is really important as well. The voters have expressed their wishes.
Come to the mic, sorry.
I think it's really important to have some local input. I think more staff input from Island Home would also be valuable. And skilled nursing care is just a standard of care. It doesn't pertain necessarily to the actual care that a nurse provides. It's about the 24-hour professional ability to assess a patient, not just supervise them, not just be their company or take care of their bathing or whatever. I think as much input as is possible is important. And we put a man on the moon. I think we can figure this out. Really, I think we can figure this out. And when you say, Jim, that anything is possible, of course there's a way to do it. And the voters approved other very, very large bills here that had nothing to do with our poor old people that we all are family members. So I think this is something that we will definitely be able to do. I think everybody has to listen to the voters. They've made their choices, made their decisions, and you can certainly worry about what it's going to cost down the road. But today, this is what the voters want.
Hi, my name is Brooke Moore, and I've been listening to this conversation since town meeting. And I think one of the problems we had at town meeting is it wasn't this or this. It was very muddied for those of us who sat in that room. And there were heartstrings pulled on the location, which are legitimate and real and all of that. But there's also financial concerns. And my greatest fear is that we go down the path of planning something for the current site without fully understanding what the trade-offs are, whether it's number of beds, cost, et cetera. We get another 2 or 3 years down the road, the price tag comes in, and the voters say no, and then no is the answer. I don't know if it's possible. I'm on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and I'm all about the town acquiring land for different purposes. Is it possible to identify and purchase a site, make dual plans, and give the voters A and B? And if B on a new site doesn't work, I'm quite sure the town can find use for that land that was purchased. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, that was voted down too, because we had the option to purchase the Howard
I'm
property.
saying the land in hand before the proposal is done.
Yeah, but we tried to ask for that.
I understand,
too.
yeah.
I just
yeah.
want to make sure
but
that's clear.
I'm not sure that it was really clear what the real trade-offs were. The planning hadn't gone far enough, in detail enough on both sites. And there was a lot of
I think
there was effort on people's part to utilize the lack of information to make people fear the different options, I guess is what I would say.
We need to do more homework on all of the implications of the current site and try and come up with a plan and see how to make it work.
It's good to follow that speaker. I'm Maureen Searle, and oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I had that weird voice. I'm Maureen Searle, and really not a member of your community. I am from Seattle, but I've been here since 2011 because my mother had a stroke that year. So I've gone through the full gamut of care, from home health care, my mother was at home, to Sherburne for over a year, and then to now our island home. My mother has been at the island home for over 3 years, and she is definitely a nursing home patient. We've gone through that full spectrum. Besides being a family member, as many of you know, because I've been tooting my own horn, I'm a health policy analyst who's worked on long-term care at the state level, including Florida, which is not to say that I am the equal of Rachel. I would never say that, or Libby. When you get down to that kind of detail, that isn't what I do. I do the Medicare, Medicaid at the national level and the state level. So I don't want to give myself too much. I don't want you to think I'm really, really knowledgeable about some of this stuff. I'm not. And I'm also the families, and probably this may be the most important thing to this town, is also the family's money manager. So I pay the bills and I pay the taxes. Now my mother is blind and she's bedbound, and she's dying right now. She's actively dying. As I said, she's been there for 3 years. And as a family, we have spent, and I know, again, money means a lot to you guys, over $500,000 on the care, over $500,000. And I have no problem with that at all. I say that because I know that registers with people, and it also gives me a voice here, because she's gotten wonderful care at that facility. And you can imagine that with my background and with some of the resources that my family has, that we could go to the Cape, we could go to Boston, we could go to any fancy place we wanted to. But we chose our island home. And I've been very satisfied with the care. And from the nurses especially, and nursing care at all levels was really excellent. But if the plan had been, let's say hypothetically, you guys built your small house nursing home, and let me say, going back to that, your numbers that you're tossing around, 30 million, 40 million, 50 million, they're predicated on a model. You hire those smart, and they're called smart architects, and they gave you a nursing home, which has all the bells and whistles. It's a lavish facility. It's like Sherburne. We all know that despite the name small house, that these small houses have huge capital costs associated with them. So you really have not thought through this, in my opinion, on this at all. So, if you were to have a small house and try to transfer my mother, well, we would be gone from the island, and you would lose your private, your private vacation or resident, excuse me. And another thing that got me going was this little number here, where it was inserted recently about cost savings. You're going to save $2 million a year. And you're going to maintain quality of care, which just kind of blew me away. How in the world do you manage to do that? And it's kind of a muddled document, but you achieve cost savings, as you know, through the staffing. The staffing is Matt says, and I completely agree with him. I mean, I understand all this. I understand what's going on at the national level with the Trump administration and everything else. But I do want you to see this with your eyes wide open here. And what we're talking about with a small house model is not simply a building. We're talking about a staffing model, and the way that they save money on that is they reduce the number of nurses, registered nurses. Even Judith Rabig, who was one of the town's rubber stamp consultants, admitted, I've got a quote for her, that's how they save money, is by reducing the registered nursing staff. And as we know from our lovely woman at the Landmark House, that is the essence of a nursing home, people. You can't demedicalize a nursing home, and create this beautiful building and say, voila. It's by its very definition, a medical facility for people who have serious and complicated medical needs. I mean, if you just look at the kinds of prescriptions, kinds of medications these people have. I know you want me to shut up.
I don't want to cut you off, but we were actually in the middle of making a motion to move forward with redesigning the current facility.
Well, you're cutting
so
me off,
I think
thank
we're.
Can I offer one quick comment?
Yes.
Well, we have a motion on. We have
But
a motion on the
in
floor.
the middle of making a motion.
Well, rightly or wrongly, it was my impression that the new facility idea was what staved off dealing with all the current day-to-day problems that Rachel and everyone else. My mother was there for a year and a half. There are many petty things that need to be solved in the current facility in order for the people who are actually living there right now, tonight. And I would hate to see those needs neglected. I know you've already tackled some of them, but there are people who have, their needs that even small things like the laundry hampers could be dealt with.
Everybody's really aware of the needs and's been working.
Well, I just don't want those to get lost in the motion.
Talking daily about any issues that are going on there, and we're actively looking for a new administrator.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a lot being done that's separate from this discussion.
And Rachel is not being fired, as some people have apparently said.
That's why I want to clarify. It was two parallel tracks. We're going to continue.
Yeah,
improving
continue
the
everything
current
that we're
facility.
currently doing.
Right. And then go on this create this other parallel track, which is what my bad motion was started with. Do we need to edit that
I think
motion?
we need to start over.
And maybe we're not ready for something tonight. I mean, I don't hear personally. So
just want to make sure you have direction where.
If you want to make a motion, but you want to refine it a little, we could work on it a bit and maybe circulate it for your next meeting.
Well, could we start with just making a motion to get a recap on the needs and the demographics? So before we go forward with engaging a firm for design.
So, and I'm just help me understand why that's necessary.
Everyone's been asking for that tonight.
I mean,
to me, I feel like we're going to be able to fit a certain amount on that site.
But I mean, tell me. I mean, we have the analysis of the projections through 2025. So, and I'm just trying to understand. We have the, it's all based on assumptions, and they were talked about. Those were all laid out, so I'm just trying to understand how a new set of demographics what are we looking for? And excuse me. So I'd ask our board members, what are we looking for specifically that we don't have now in terms of the demographics?
Well, I think Ella made the point that the demographics are changing from when the study was done to now with the baby boom and elders.
The actual point I made, and thank you for allowing me to reiterate that, is that the demographics were done, and I presume they were accurate. They were based on current census, and with projections from Peter, thank you, Morrison, the demographer on the island. They were not interpreted, Jim, in my opinion, appropriately, because they only were interpreted to the year 2020. They were not interpreted, the design for the building anywhere was based on numbers to 2020, not further. And from 2020 to 2030, the demographic that will need the services of the island home doubles on the island. You can't, I mean, I know you're the numbers guy. Those are the numbers.
And I think you may be right that they only ran it through that date, but I think their other recommendation was there was room to put another wing or two on to cover that. And I think the numbers, what they were saying is that the numbers were going, like the uses was changing. So the numbers were going out to that date, but then they were taking some of it back. They were saying some were level 4 and they could be dealt with more cheaply here. But I think what you're saying from 2020 on, we could have them look at that. But I do think it was in there. And that
They make demographic projections weighed with what they perceive as the counterbalancing factors in the delivery of that care. And we looked at there's the graph in the report that shows how through regulations and reimbursement, the dollars paid for nursing home versus home health has really had that intersect has occurred, and now home health is more than the nursing home. So that's so those were some of their assumptions.
But if we had someone else looking at it, they can
That's
vet
fine.
those and
No,
see if
that's
they go
fine.
far.
Yeah. So it's.
You need to speak at the mic, but the board really needs to talk and figure out what we're doing
Yeah,
at this point.
There was a survey that was commissioned by the Nantucket Center for Elder Affairs, and the results of that are supposed to be due out any time. And I think that it was a survey specifically for people 60 and over, and I think that could be very helpful in what we're looking at now. And I think a lot of the statistics used in the report were not from Peter Morrison's 2016 demographic. So we're looking for something local as opposed to something on a state level, I think.
So I think if Libby can find this was a question I first brought up when this architect group was, what's their experience in nursing homes, and they purported to have some, but if there's another firm out there that has more expertise and perhaps experience in retrofitting and those kinds of things, I think it'd be worth trying to find him.
Yeah, I mean, that is more of what I'm looking for, because I think we'll be able to fit a certain amount on the site, period. Like, we're going to be stuck with a certain number that will fit into the package. And it doesn't need to be based on any particular model that takes up more space or doesn't.
And I don't know if we need a motion for that, but if they can find somebody, and then I think it'd be interesting to have a conversation about what should be in an RFP along those lines. So
I think this is a big, expensive thing. I think we need a motion. I think we all need to vote on it. I don't know exactly what it needs to say, but
I'd like to know what the dollar amount
We'll
is.
have to vote on the dollar amount after the fact,
Okay.
once we find someone.
This, again, not super clear on exactly what we're doing if we end this conversation now. And I don't know if everybody else would.
Well, I think working on a motion, I think there's all sorts of things that have been, mentioned tonight. Essentially what we have now is based on the vote. We need to look at building on the site. How we do that, where we start with that, is I think where we're getting a little bit caught up. And I think there are a couple of key things that have been mentioned, like the need for making sure that we have input from their staff. We've really done our due diligence on getting input from nurses, from family members, whoever it is, from all the stakeholders. And that is very clear that we've done that and incorporated their responses into it, into any decision. So I feel like it's just a little bit muddied by where to start, because we really are, again, I think we're jumping to the let's get it designed, but again, we don't even know what we're designing, and we still need to do some information gathering, demographic projections. So on one hand, I agree with Jim. I don't feel quite ready for a motion. I do want to move things forward, but I think Libby's suggestion of who are we building for, that demographic projection, that could be one place to start, just to have something to start. But I'd also be comfortable with taking a week, having Libby come up with a suggested motion or a place to start.
We need to talk now. I need to cut off the public comment at some point and figure this out. We've been in the middle of making a motion 3 times.
So we could make a motion to ask town administration to identify a firm that has the attributes we just discussed, who would come up with some ideas about how to build or I can't figure out the words but come up with a plan to use the existing site to serve the elder needs of our community.
Is that an RFQ or is that just?
I don't know.
Administration will tell us.
I don't know
what that is.
So.
Is it something along the lines, Libby, of what we've been doing with the Nantucket water quality study, where it's not even necessarily going to the one firm that's going to do all of it, but writing up the scope of works for the RFQ? And I think that's where the local input, the demographic projections, all of that.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing a little bit is we'll just do some research and to try to find this specialist sort of firm, and maybe more what Jim is saying is come up with a plan to use the existing site. Maybe this firm includes the who does it serve part in that plan.
Yeah.
If there is a firm that sort of does a comprehensive.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we need to look at obviously the best way to design it as well for the site in terms of how many rooms and
for who.
The 2 pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And do we want to have I know it's been spoken about in previous boards when I was sitting out there for years about having a budget override for
the operating costs.
But continue the conversation. So it's, if we want more transparency, that to me, that is more transparent. If you see it on the annual town meeting.
Is that for the operating cost of the existing building?
For the loss, we do a budget override to cover the loss, right?
Well, I guess there's a couple
in
things.
The general fund right
you could have I think it'd be great to have an article every year that specifies the amount of money that is subsidized. Now, there's some who think we should have an override, so we only talk about that once, and then the money, and then we lose that conversation. I think it's worth having that conversation every year, personally.
Can we go back to voting on trying to find a firm to do some work on the current site? Did I get a second on that motion?
I made a motion.
Second.
All those in favor? Jim.
I made a motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'm in favor. I'm how do I say it? I'm a little worried. I'm worried. We've done a lot, and I'm worried that it's gonna take too long.
We're going to get a dollar figure.
I understand, and so I'm just I'm in favor of it in a sort of quick manner, working off what we have and identifying what else needs to be gathered and doing it quickly. I'm not in favor of it if it's going to drag us out 2 or 3 years. I don't think we have that time. So.
Okay. So 4 in favor.
I am just
okay. 5
hesitant.
5 in favor.
Too hesitant.
On the over.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this
I know.
is very complicated. There's no one who's not hesitant about how to handle it. Override. Do you guys want to bring that up when we talk further about warrant articles?
Well, to me, an override, I think it not so much as, again, an override is a one-time thing when you say, this is the amount of money we're going to, the voters or the citizens are going to pay every year, and it's a exclusionary override. I'm talking about an article every year that specifies the amount of money that we're subsidizing the island home.
We almost do that already with how the budget is structured, with the island home being an enterprise fund now, and you can see what the subsidy is.
I don't think we take a vote every year that talks about that we would appropriate this amount of money from X fund to Y fund to subsidize.
We actually do.
Okay.
In the enterprise fund budgets that are voted at annual town meeting, the funding recommendations, that's the recommendation from the FinCom, identifies every funding source for every enterprise fund. So with respect to the island home, there is a funding line that says from taxation and other revenues in the general fund, and there's a number attached to it within the enterprise
So maybe we need to call that article every year.
That's what I was going to say. If
You
you're
know?
going to discuss it, the
Yeah.
article needs to be called
Yeah.
for discussion.
Okay, if we do that, that's fine, yeah.
Okay. So it is there every year, so.
And then the other option is if it were an override, that's a commitment from the taxpayers every year saying that they're going to pay the additional funding to subsidize it.
Yes, that's correct.
So those are the two approaches.
True, but that's.
In terms of talking
And
about
now we're
it.
going to get into geek world here, geek finance. But this is, so then it goes up and it is allowed to grow at 2.5% per year. So, so you've got your constraints of 2.5%. So you have to live within that override. If you don't live within that override, you have another override, and then you have another override, or you cut somewhere. And that's the reality of what we're facing is some of the things that haven't happened there are because we haven't lived within our, in our constraints. We haven't lived within those, when the budgets. And so then we can't fix a building this year. We can't paint this. We can't do this. Well, we had the money and we know what the constraints are. And so somehow, if we do an override, you're basically saying we're going to have an override, and then with what, then we're going to have another override every single year. Or we're going to cut things. And so that's where the money part of this is a huge part of this. How do you operate something in an efficient manner that's fair for the, residents and fair for the taxpayers and fair for the employees? And I think that's part of what we were trying to get at previously, that we really, it's one of the legs and it has to be given as much time or more than some of those others. So anyway.
I was looking for a way to kind of, on what Dave was saying on the financial bucket, quarterly conversations.
Yeah, I think that's good too. We should do that too.
Is that a part of it?
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, we do get quarterly. We get quarterly updates.
We do. Yeah.
Okay. And we just need to. I'll need to pay more attention to them. So.
But I think we make the focus of those a little more toward this, toward these issues than just the exact operating, but it's similar.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you for the conversation.
We'll move ahead. Once we have some more information, I'll be back on an agenda and we'll let all the interested parties know. Thanks for your participation. Now we have an update from Housing Nantucket.
Hello, I'm Ann Crispa, Director of Housing Nantucket. First of all, just wanted to apologize. I'm so sorry that I missed you when you called me at first. You raced through, exactly. So it won't happen again. And I appreciate that you were able to accommodate me later on in the agenda. So thank you. Oh, thank you. So I'm here tonight on basically 3 tasks. Number 1, to say thank you very much for your support specifically over the past 2 years. We've seen some huge progress, and just wanted to say and acknowledge how we appreciate your walking the walk and not just talking the talk. There's a lot of attention for affordable housing right now, and it's been in large part because of the town's contribution. So thank you. Number two, wanted to let you know that a group of housing stakeholders have been assembling. So when I say housing stakeholders, it's essentially people who are, and organizations who are committed to the affordable housing cause and making progress on that. So we're getting together every month to try to coordinate our efforts, and just wanted to let you know that. And if anyone is interested in attending one of those meetings, you're more than welcome. So that's number two. And then number three, as part of this housing stakeholders group, we're putting together a reference document, which essentially is to help people from the community as well as anyone sitting on boards. But basically, it's a living document that would live on Housing Nantucket's site, so we would regularly update it. And this would present information so it could be used for reference. So, we don't have to keep going over what's 80% AMI and how many units are on the shy list. It also assembles what's going on for in the pipeline too. So those are the three things I'm going to talk about tonight. This is not the document that I would like to talk about, though. It is the PowerPoint that I sent around, not this document. No. So essentially what I did was created a PowerPoint to just kind of summarize what this document is about. So what we're seeing here on the screen is basically what we gave to the selectmen, asking for your feedback before we make it available for public consumption. We want to make sure that everything's correct, number one, make sure that we're not missing anything, and then make it available for everybody else. So there's a unified front going out there to try to present the affordable housing cause. All right, so I'll just kind of go over. Okay, sure. A little bit about Housing Nantucket. Housing Nantucket's been around for a quarter century. We're a private 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is to create affordable housing solutions for Nantucket residents, and we primarily serve the low to moderate income bracket. We do the Covenant program. We have 30 affordable rentals and scattered sites around the island. And we also do education, first-time homebuyer education classes, as well as advocacy. So here we are. Here's a presentation. And, yeah, can I flip these? Okay. There we go. So we envision Nantucket as a place where all residents have housing that meets their needs. This housing stakeholders work group that we've been assembling, the purpose is to compile the information on affordable housing inventory, things in the planning, projects under construction. We want to measure the progress that's going on in the community and aid in the creation of mixed income rental and home ownership opportunities. So these are some of the people who are part of this group. And, we've got members from various organizations, Habitat, Nantucket Education Trust, as well as Landmark House. We've got a couple people from the town, the Housing Authority, the Trust Fund, CPC, Our Island Home, the Civic League, Cottage Hospital, Community Foundation, Chamber of Commerce, the Interfaith Council, Nantucket Athenaeum, and someone from Cape Cod 5. So trying to get a broad spectrum of the needs. The last time we really saw a huge jump in the way that people talked about affordable housing was after we published the 2015 Housing Needs Assessment. So Housing Nantucket was able to publish this report because of funding from the Community Foundation. And one of our goals that was identified was 240 affordable units by 2025. So that was over the course of 10 years. And those are in a range of affordability because I think we all agree that there are higher levels of affordable units needed, not just for the very low income, because right now the median family or the home price is about 1.5. I'm hearing anything from really 1.5 million up to 2 million. So a range of affordable options are necessary. So just wanted to give you a little progress report. The municipality itself, just on its own, has done a lot. And very significantly, a housing production plan was adopted. We talked about this at special town meeting floor. That was a necessary part if we ever were to try to obtain safe harbor from unfriendly 40Bs. So we did that, and that took a lot of coordination between boards. So kudos. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund has been strengthened and funded. We've now got a full board that meets even now sometimes a couple times a month. So that's a big difference from where we were in 2014, certainly. We have a housing specialist that's been hired. The 6 fairgrounds development proposal was awarded, so there's progress there. We're now in the midst of some public forums, which are really important. So we're out there talking about that with the community. The special legislation that's being pursued up at the Housing Bank, sponsored by Dylan Fernandez and Representative Dylan Fernandez, and passed by all of us at town meeting. That's moving along, progressing well. And also different sorts of sewer connection fees and affordable development fees that have been waived. So we're really excited about that too. Something else I wanted to mention was zoning initiatives. There's been a lot of progress in zoning, and that's one of the things that our education document is assembling. If someone had a piece of land, they didn't really know what they could do on that site, then what options are out there, either for a large lot subdivision or tiny houses. So that's all the types of things that we go over in this education document. As far as development goes, since 2015, we have 56 homes that have been created, and that means new development, at varying income levels. So some of them are eligible for the SHI, some of them are not SHI eligible, but they're certainly serving an important need, including the 40 new homes at Satram's Path, the 6 new rentals that Housing Nantucket has created and constructed, 14 new Covenant homes, 3 new Habitat homes, and 7 homes at Beach Plum Village. Just so we all know, and this is information that I got from the housing specialist, 18 of these 56 homes are eligible for the SHI list, and they're being submitted as a group. And from what I understand, that happens at the beginning of the calendar year, so that you're kind of in that safety zone for the calendar year. So that's why they're not being put up at this time at the end of the year. So that's the story with the updates on the SHI list. So we haven't changed our SHI numbers, but we are making progress on that. A couple policy changes that have happened significantly. The Land Bank has adopted an affordable housing land use policy, which essentially says that when they're offered a piece of land, they'll look at it to try to see if it's appropriate, or if it's appropriate to carve off a portion before the transaction occurs for affordable housing, availability for affordable housing purposes to purchase as well. So we haven't really been able to use that just yet, but it's there, and I hope that we will be able to use it sometime in the near future. There's also an O exemption, which is for affordable purchasers. They are exempt from the land bank fee of 2%. So that's a big deal for our residents. So in a nutshell, what we need to do going forward, need to continue, and this is what my ask is, if you will, of the Selectmen, to continue allocating land, funding, and resources towards affordable housing. I know that it's important to you, and you're demonstrating that, so I really hope that we can continue this focus on that. Education and utilizing available resources. That's where we would like to help, where if we assemble all of these resources in one place, anybody can go on there, and I hope to get feedback from you, either today or, in the future, if you have anything that you'd like to add to that document before we send it out. Zoning ordinances, so facilitating affordability in new construction and subdivision through the zoning ordinances, also a continuing priority. Establishing a housing bank fund, so that's what's going on up at the state level. We need to develop that 6 fairground site with community housing. That's very important to actually see that through. So we hope that that will happen. Using the land bank's affordable housing policy, like I said. Another thing is relieving building permit and water connection fees. That would be something that would be very helpful to us as a nonprofit affordable housing developer if we didn't have to pay these fees, which can sometimes be quite significant. So, and then anything else that you might suggest, also open to that. So just wanted to say thank you for our support. We have many people living in our housing. At last count, it was about 160 residents who are in our housing. And then that's great that we're able to provide that housing. But on the other hand, our waiting lists are so long, and they've actually doubled since this time, or actually probably June of 2015. At this time, we're twice as many people as we were back then. So we don't really advertise, and we have about 160 people on those waiting households, I should say, on those waiting lists. So that's a presentation, and if anyone has any questions, I'm willing to answer them. And then also, if anyone from the public would like to learn more, you're welcome to sign up for our newsletter, which we send around monthly, and that's on our website. You can sign up for that or get in touch with me directly.
Does anyone have questions?
A couple things. On page 37, 56 homes. You're not counting the covenant homes? If this is a draft, that I'm not sure how you got to 56. Unless I do 40, I don't know. If I go 40 and 7 and 3 gets me 50 and 6, then I'm missing my covenant homes. So those aren't counting.
I'm sorry, which page are you talking about?
Oh, it's page 37. Yeah, the top one here.
Doesn't look like.
Oh, your agenda. Okay.
Yeah, it's saying 56 homes at varying levels.
Okay, I
And
see
then
what
I
you're saying.
can't, I'm trying to figure out how to get to 56.
40 plus 6 plus 3 plus 7 equals 56.
So the new covenant homes aren't counted. In that, the new covenant homes created don't count.
Oops, guess I forgot to add that one.
There you go. So there's number one. So
Yeah.
You're at 60. So, or is it 70?
70. 70, even better.
You're at 70.
Yes.
I'm trying to help you.
Yes.
You're at 70.
Thank you.
Number two, on the chamber, one of the things that, and you might have these numbers, is the businesses. Do you have is there any idea? I know you guys looked at it a few years ago. How many businesses house how many people? And I think that would be, and it could go under your chamber because the chamber's doing the nonprofit.
Yes, and he said the new director is interested in coming, and he will come to our next meeting, which is Friday.
Because I think that when you go to Boston, that would really help. And I think the number would be staggering. I think you'd be seeing, I hire probably 45 people, 50 people over the course of summer, house probably 30 of them. And I'm a fairly small business. I mean, Stop and Shop is housing how many? And, I think you'd have a lot of, and I think even though it doesn't count toward the shy,
Yes.
I think it would help your argument when you're able to say, the businesses have taken responsibility and they're housing 3,000 people.
Yep.
And so I think that would be helpful in your presentation.
Yep, that's good. I know there's been surveys, that survey data wasn't scientific.
Right.
So, but I think that it could be explored further.
But I don't think it has to be, to the 100% perfect, but I think getting a gauge of it. The yacht club's putting up a huge new
Right.
building and, and they're talking about the building they're doing. So they're doing one for the community sailing or, those groups.
It's maybe
are
the
coming together.
largest ones.
Yeah, I mean, those are substantial. And I
Right.
think it sort of shows the, sort of the desperation we're in, but it also shows the, sort of we're solving it, that the people are doing that. So
Just a general comment, it's more about names. As I've learned about the need for community housing, I've seen a kind of a evolution in terminology from, low income to affordable to workforce, and it was really kind of Rita's. It was an aha moment when Rita mentioned, well, we're really talking about community housing. So that's a term, that's a phrase I'm going to be using as I
Right.
talk about it, because I think for me, it helps broaden the issue and tell a story.
That's the way the Community Preservation Act also refers to this type of housing as community housing. So I see your point there. That's a good call.
And I think that's good.
It's Rita's point.
Thank you.
But I've been around long enough that I remember when it was a big deal, when it was changed to workforce.
Right.
Yeah, right. No,
Workforce was, though, that's a little nicer name. Let's call it that, instead of affordable, because that has bad connotations. So,
We're sort of coming full circle because I think you said it was community housing, but for me it is important to identify who we're building for, and I think community captures that much better. And again, as someone who would fall into any of the categories, I think affordable and workforce are very limiting, whereas community, I think, is a better term. So, thank you, Jim.
A quick question. On the relieving of the permit and water connection fees, how much is that possible? Water would be with the water company, right? Not anything at the board level. And what are the permits could we give relief on, and what's been done in the past? Just to keep me up to speed.
Well, I know you have a policy which was adopted in July 2016, that just basically says you'll waive, I think it's the connection fee, but not the privilege fee.
For sewers?
Yeah.
Or
For sewer.
water?
For
sewer.
Yes,
For
but
sewers.
you can't waive, from my understanding from the Water Commission, you cannot waive any of that, but that's a significant expense, several $1,000s per connection. And then any building permit fees and, any boards we go to, we pay all those fees. It kind of feels like, it's a little moving monies around, but so we're going to the CPC asking them to pay the, it's kind of circular.
I mean, I think there's probably a amount we would need to get in the building department, but you may be able to tier it there. And I'm not sure that would be a discussion for them for a later time.
Mm-hmm. And then you said you had 160 residents currently?
Yes.
In affordable?
Yeah. So we have the 30
Roughly.
homes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you said in the last, how many, 2 years? Last year it's doubled the demand?
Yes. So 2 years ago, or it was actually right around June 2016, where we started to say, okay, how much is our list growing? And the demand is really going up quite a bit.
And that's 160 as well?
Yeah.
The same number of that's currently in is just a coincidence?
So I need to verify the
I
number.
was just curious. I didn't know if you misspoke.
Yeah, I
160
probably
again?
did.
Because that's a lot.
Yeah. Thinking I think I did misspeak. Sorry about that. The number of people in our units is probably less than that. So we have 35 units, and then you'll say about, I believe it was 30 adults, 30 children, 30 females, and 30 adults. But, let me double check that.
But the 160 on the waiting list.
Yeah, that is for sure.
That's
Yeah.
legit. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I wasn't trying to get you. I was trying
No.
to clarify. So I understood.
But that's kind of the point of this reference document, because there's just so many numbers out there that it's just nice to have something where you're like, oh yeah, that's the firm number there. So I think that as a stakeholders, I'm just one person, so it is easy for me to make a math mistake here or there. So when I have a group of people looking at it, then we say, you didn't add that right, or whatever it is, and then we can make sure that the reference document that's up online is correct. And if there is some misinformation in there, you can send an email or however it is, so that then we can correct it, and then it's public again.
And then you guys will update it every year as.
Well, I mean, ongoing is the way I see it working. That's what the living document is supposed to imply, that we would be able to update it all the time.
Just one other comment. While I thank you for recognizing the role of the board in moving this forward from a policy standpoint, I also should recognize that the heavy lifting for this in terms of town staff has been through the planning department and and our housing specialist. And as a result, I think we've actually. We now have some expertise that is being looked at regionally and are asked to being called on regionally and within the state to advise statewide and regional authorities on community housing. So we've developed a resource that's as a town that's recognized really outside our borders, and I just want to recognize them too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
waiting. Are there any committee reports?
So, Rob had the landfill forum discussing water quality monitoring and the plan. And it was very informative. It was well done. And I think the response was very well. A focus on transparency and getting some answers. So it was well done. And I think well received.
And it went long. I heard till 9:30. Started at 6. I mean, people.
It was a lot of
Yeah.
questions. Yeah.
They like their water.
But it was really informative, just to break down the landfill. I don't think a lot of people, they go in, they drop the trash off. They don't really know what happens in that property, so it was well done.
Yeah, it was. That's it for me.
I had Capcom this morning, just 2.5 hours, sat in this room and worked with the kind of the fleet management facilities with DPW and just went over everything that's needed there. So we're getting there. We have a couple more departments to go through, and then we start ranking.
So are you seeing some big numbers coming forward for the annual town meeting?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting our big number, and then we have to start scrunching it down and ranking. But I think there's going to be some big, debt exclusions, and we've got to figure all that out. But it's not set in stone, as we talked about this morning. But yeah, it's going to be some bigger numbers.
Will we have an estimate for 2 weeks from now? Approximate?
Is it 2? That quick?
Well, the committee's next meeting is the 29th. And some of the numbers we're talking about today were, it's a total of over $40 million.
45, yeah.
Because those are the numbers I'd like to have prior to the discussion on the tax rate. Because I think, we should use that to sort of spread the pain out a little bit. So that, I think if that's 40, then we can back into the number somehow a little bit.
And I know we don't, the permanent financing doesn't come on all right away and everything, but it's always helpful to understand the per taxpayer or per average household impact of these. And I'd ask Libby to see if we can get through Brian some kind of per either average or both average and median prices for the taxpayer for these projects.
Do you want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.